The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's WIC Works webinar, How and Why Happiness Makes the Workplace Better. This is Margaret Aumann, Communications Coordinator for California WIC Association, and I'll be your moderator today for the next hour. I'm going to review our agenda quickly. We'll do some reminders about continuing education and logistics. I'll briefly go over the objectives, and then we'll get into what we're here for with our presenter, Reggie Caldwell. And then we'll have some time at the end for questions and answers. So we're glad so many of you have joined us, and some of you may be seeking to earn continuing education, whether you're in dietetics or the lactation profession. Just some reminders that you need to register. You need to have registered in advance and attend the entire webinar live. Unfortunately, we can't provide education credit for reviewing this recording afterwards. You'll need to complete an evaluation survey, and there will be a link to that in your follow-up email, which will come tomorrow. And if you're interested in purchasing a certificate, there will be a link to that as well in tomorrow's follow-up email. Then we'll issue you a certificate by email if you meet all the above criteria. And we just want to say we appreciate your patience. We're a small staff, and we're doing our best to offer you valuable continuing education opportunities. So for today's webinar, everyone is in listen-only mode, and we hope that you are full of questions near the end of the program and that you will type them into your question box. That way I can present them to Reggie at the end, and he can answer as many as possible in the time that we have at the end. A reminder that we are recording this webinar, and it will be linked in your follow-up email as well as posted on our website under the events section. There's going to be lots of other resources there, the slides from today and other webinars and other materials related, so please check that out. Briefly, what we're all here for and what's in store for us today is that our presenter will guide us in learning about the science of happiness, ways to define it, how to measure happiness, how to cultivate it in our lives, and most importantly, how to apply what we've learned at our workplace and to foster an environment of wellness. So we're glad you're all here to join us in this effort. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter. Reggie Caldwell is a licensed clinical social worker, and he's been a public health consultant for more than 25 years, developing and implementing health policy targeting racial and ethnic health disparities. To improve health and address the social determinants of health, Mr. Caldwell is working with communities to increase health equity through a social justice lens. In addition, he's a practicing psychotherapist for individuals and couples, which continues to inform his understanding of individuals and their interactions with the systems that influence their health and wellness. Now, I realize that all sounds very serious. However, we know from our brief interactions with Reggie that he is what he calls himself, a purveyor of happiness, and he's with us today to share some insights on this topic. So Reggie, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to pass the controls over to you and look forward to what you have to share with us today.
Great, thanks, Margaret. And I don't know why this is not there. Hi, there we are. It worked. Hey, hi. This is Reggie Caldwell. I am a clinical social worker. I actually have been a social worker for 30 years this year. And I'm excited about sharing information with you about the science of happiness. I'm here as a consultant to the California WIC Association, not in my role as a health equity analyst at the California Department of Public Health. And here I am, and you can see me actually, that's my happy place. That's happy me and my happy place. I call myself a purveyor of happiness. You know, you can call yourself anything, right? I can be an actor, I can be a model. I can be anything I want. So I'm a purveyor of happiness in my happy place. And that's actually my backyard, which is one of my happiest spots in the world. So another author had a quote, "Happiness doesn't depend on what happens to us. It is how we view the past, enjoy the moment, and create the future." And that's actually a really nice quote because it really speaks to what happiness is, and it speaks to an idea we're going to talk about in the future in this webinar, which is this idea of savoring the past, enjoying the moment, and also looking forward to the future. But before we get started, I want to make sure that we really focus on making sure that we help ourselves before we help others. It's a really key concept in this work in the science of happiness, because without that, we actually aren't able to help other folks. We're all in the helping profession, and with that, we tend to help other people before we help ourselves. So to make this work for ourselves and to do our best work, we need to ensure that our body, minds, and souls are well nurtured. And I talk a lot about this idea of health, that health has three broad components: physical, spiritual, and mental health, and how we nurture those things and cultivate those in our lives. Next, researchers have found that happiness is linked to several measures of success, and this supports the concept that that success leads to happiness, but happiness also leads to success. So they actually can go both ways, and I think that's actually really exciting. I laugh all the time because I say, for me to be successful, I want to make somebody laugh every day. If I make somebody laugh every day, I'm successful in my work. So I look at success in very small ways and in bigger ways as well. So before I get deeply into the science of happiness, is that not the cutest little boy ever? He made me so happy. All right, but besides that, he looks like he's from like 1942, you know. Before that, actually, the science of happiness emerged from positive psychology, and positive psychology was a huge shift for me. In 2005, when I started doing this work, what they say in positive psychology is, let's not focus on people's problems, let's actually focus on their strengths. And so that's where this came from. And it talked about this idea of improving one's quality of life and really focusing, and we'll talk later once again about strength and how that happens. But people who are satisfied with life eventually have more reasons to be satisfied. We're going to talk very specifically about defining happiness, about measuring it, and then about how we can actually meaningfully enhance happiness in our lives. So what the researchers found is that healthy relationships, are a long-term key to happiness. They also found that actually money is important, but it doesn't really make us happy. That once we pass the basic threshold of how much money we make, the bottom line is after that, it does improve our happiness. And actually, I think it goes to about, for a family of four, after about $75,000, there's no gains in happiness after that. There's also a lot of studies, and you guys have probably seen this before, this idea that when people win the lottery, they have momentary gains in happiness, right? They buy their friends things, but over time, they actually go back to their prior level of happiness, and for some people, often they go to a lower level of happiness than they were before they got the money. And then lastly, spending money on others rather than spending money on yourself actually increases your happiness. So that's the idea of happiness. And the last is about just overall being healthier, that when you are happier, you have these physiological influences on your health, right? So people live longer, they experience lower levels of cortisol, right? We know cortisol has an impact on our health and wellness, lower levels on our blood pressure. It improves our immune functioning, and it reduces our cardiovascular activity. And those are all actually markers of good health. Dalai Lama said the purpose of our lives is to be happy. So how do we define happiness? This actually comes from Marty Seligman's work. Marty Seligman is classified as the godfather of positive psychology. He's an amazing researcher and theorist, and he came up with this. And he said, the first measure of happiness is living the pleasure-filled life. And I actually also always call it the Jay-Z Beyonce life, right? Traveling in private planes, which I still want to do once. It's only a momentary lapse of pleasure, but I'm with it. I want to be down with it just once. Expensive champagnes, nice parties, that's a pleasure-filled life. But it actually doesn't contribute to long-term happiness. It actually just contributes to small-term happiness. All of us, luckily, live a life that is fully engaged. And so that's life that is involved with expanding one's gifts and doing interesting work. And that actually contributes to the happiness of others. And so we all do that. Anybody at WIC does that work now. But the third level of happiness is this idea of living a meaningful life, right? That's making social connections, in service for others, and those are the largest contributors of life. Ultimately, it's really the idea that it comes from a well-lived life, right? No surprise. And I've got the WIC Association folks in the room, and they're all sitting quietly. If you guys want to laugh and chuckle, it's okay. Don't feel like you can't laugh. It's fine. Laughing helps me. It makes me my jokes didn't fall flat, okay? So please laugh. All right. So that's the first aspect of things, is defining it. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about these definitions and what that looks like. And one of the things that I know about science of happiness very specifically is it's also about being very conscious about actions that we take. So I know that when I do important work, so today I'm here with you guys doing important work talking about happiness, so I know that I'm living a life well lived, but I'm also living a meaningful life by doing that, and it just makes me happier. On my way here, I was smiling and joyful driving here. We're actually in a quite warm conference room, and it doesn't bother me in the least to be in this room because I know that what I'm doing is actually really important good stuff. So I'm very excited about kind of how all that plays out in our lives. So we can also measure happiness. I have been very fortunate to be in contact with some major theorists in the field of the science of happiness. My favorite is Sonia Lyubomirsky. She's this tall, elegant, gorgeous woman who studies happiness. And I'm like, really, Sonia? Smart, beautiful, and happy? She's got all three. And she's been, she's a internationally known researcher, and it's so great because she's so accessible to me as I move forward doing this work. And so some of what I'm going to talk about today is very specifically from her work. So we can actually measure happiness on many scales. I'm going to take us through 3 different scales today. I'm going to take us through optimism, general happiness, and then well-being. But there are other ones as well. You can actually measure resilience. There are ways you can actually measure. And what I love about it is I've actually kept some of my old assessments and seen how they've improved over time, because they're very short assessments. So everybody needs to grab a pencil or a pen and a piece of paper. So I'm going to just pause for a second as this slides up so folks can take a second to grab that. And this is once again Marty Seligman, who talks about optimism. He says optimists are people who will tell themselves good stories after defeat. Right? And I love that quote because it is the idea that, bad things always happen, but good can come from those things. I'm going to go ahead and assume everybody has pen and paper in hand. And now we're going to go through Giltay's optimism questions. All right, so question 1 is, I expect much from life. Do you fully agree, partially agree, or disagree? Question 2, I don't look forward to what lies ahead for me in the years to come. Do you fully agree, partially agree, or disagree? Question 3, my days seem to be passing so slowly. Do you fully agree, do you partially agree, or do you disagree? And last, I'm full of plans. Do you fully agree, partially agree, or disagree? Now I think you're wondering, so what do I do with this information, Reggie? What's my score? What's my score? All right, so here we go. If you, for question 1, if you fully agreed, you get 2 points. Partially agreed, 1 point. Disagree, 0 points. Question 2, if you fully agreed, you get 0 points. If you partially agreed, you get 1 point. If you disagreed, you get 2 points. Question 3, if you fully agreed, you get 0 points. If you partially agree, you get 1 point. If you disagree, you get 2 points. And last, question 4, if you fully agree, you get 2 points. Partially agree, 1 point. And disagree, 0 points. All right, it's just very simple. You can add up your scores. And I'm going to go back through those again quickly in case folks didn't get that. So 1 is, if you fully agree, you get 2 points. Partially agree, 1 point. Disagree, 0 points. 2, if you fully agree, 0 points. Partially agree, 1 point. Disagree, 2 points. 3 is fully agree, 0 points. Partially agree, 1 point. Disagree, 2 points. And last four, fully agree 2 points, partially agree 1 point, and disagree 0 points. So obviously the highest number you can get is 8, and based on his validated tools, if you have 7 or higher, you're an optimistic person, is what he says in his work. Okay? And we'll talk later about optimism and how you can cultivate optimism. If you're if you are not, that's okay. my colleagues are looking at me like, oh no, what am I? I'm not even asking their score. They're just staring at me like, what number am I? So it's okay if you're a 3. It's all right. You have other strengths. You're still beautiful in many ways, ladies. Still beautiful in many ways. All right. So the next scale is Lubomirsky's subjective happiness scale. And so this is the Likert scale from 1 to 7, 1 being not very happy, 7 being a very happy person. So number 1 is, I consider myself a not very happy person to a very happy person on a scale from 1 to 7. Number 2, compared with most of my peers, I consider myself less happy or more happy. Number 3, some people are generally very happy. They enjoy life regardless of what's going on, getting the most out of everything. To what extent does this characterization describe you? Is it not at all or to a great deal? And question 4, some people are generally not very happy. Although they are not depressed, they don't seem very happy. They never seem as happy as they might be. To what extent does this characterize you? From 1, not at all, to 7, a great deal. And as I was reviewing this scale, one of the things that she actually found in this scale is she started with a longer tool, and actually she ended up with these 4 questions, and she validated them both here, interestingly enough, and she was born in Russia and migrated to the U.S. when she was a child, so she's actually validated the tool in Russian as well, and in Russia. So now let's get some scores. So for all of them, except question 4, you just keep the number that you have. But question 4 is a reverse code. So if you gave yourself a 1, you would give yourself a 7. If you gave yourself a 2, you would give yourself a 6. If you give yourself a 3, you would give yourself a 5. 4 is a 4. 5 is a 3. 6 is a 2. And 1 is a 7. Okay? So you reverse the scores on just number 4. And then what you do is you add those scores and then divide by 7. And if you are like I am, not knowing basic math, you get out your phone and it takes care of all of that for you. So grab your phone and get to it. Once again, let me go through the scoring. So for questions 1, 2, and 3, you just take the number that is there. For question 4, you actually do a reverse. And if you are a 1, you give yourself a 7. If you're a 2, you give yourself a 6, a 3, a 5, a 4, a 4, a 5, a 3, a 6, a 2, and 7, a 1. And what she found from her research is that the average was 5.6 overall for folks. It's actually a little lower, interestingly enough, for college students, and it's a little higher for seniors. So that's the average score. Obviously, the highest can be 7, and the lowest is 1. So you can see where you stand on that scale. And once again, this is just a subjective way to look at your happiness and think through what that looks like for you. And I like thinking about this. Some of the things that I do in my life is on about a quarterly or half-year basis, I'm going through sort of life assessment. You just kind of do that, like, how are things going in this time of life? So every quarter to half year, I should do a few of these assessments to see where I stand and see how things change in my life. And in the 10 years I've been doing this, they've all made small incremental changes. So now let's look at Denier's subjective well-being scale. His scale is, in most ways, my life is close to ideal. And once again, it's a Likert scale. 1 strongly disagree, 7 strongly agree. Number 2, the conditions of my life are excellent. 1 is strongly disagree. 1 is strongly disagree, 7 is strongly agree. Number 3, I am satisfied with my life. 1 is strongly disagree, 7 is agree. Number 4, so far I have important things I want in my life. 1 is strongly disagree, 7 is strongly agree. And the 5th and final question on today's subjective wellness scale is, if I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing. Strongly agree is 1, strongly disagree is 1, strongly agree is 7. All right? So I'll give you a second to add those scores, and luckily for those, all you have to do is total the scores up. And so this scale, very specifically, is a subjective scale of well-being. So it's an example of happiness, right? People that feel well and whole in their life are similar to people that are happy. Once again, they live healthy lives. They feel productive in their world. They feel as if they're doing things and well connected to others. So let me give you the scores. So if you are between 31 and 35, you live an extremely satisfied life. Between 26 and 30, you live a satisfied life. Between 21 and 25, you're a slightly satisfied life. At 20 is neutral. 15 to 19 is a slightly dissatisfied life. 10 to 14 is a dissatisfied life. And 5 to 9 is an extremely dissatisfied life. And one of the things that's interesting about this is that almost everybody falls into the satisfied category. That's the most common response is 26 to 30. It's not everybody, but the most common response is feeling like they live a satisfied life. That's good to know that people feel more satisfied in their world. All right. I love Alice Walker, and this quote makes me really happy. Don't wait around for other people to be happy for you. Any happiness you get, you've got to make yourself. And that's actually the next phase of what we're going to talk about, with this idea of, so we talked about defining it, living a meaningful life. We talked about ways you could measure it through validated tools. And now we're actually going to talk about how do you cultivate it? What are things you can do, right? So one of the ways that we can think about happiness is just the basic stuff of things happening in the environment. I'm taking 2 vacations next month, and I'm excited. I take a week off in Vancouver, and then I take a week off in Hawaii, and stay at a beach house with friends, so that's fabulous. So that actually is stuff that makes me happy, right? So that's only 10% of our happiness. There is a genetic component, which is 50%. And with that, you can actually have a lower set point, or you can have a higher set point, right? So genes play a portion of this. But the most interesting thing to me is that you can actually intentionally do activities and increase your happiness by 40%. So if you add that to your set point, you could be over 50% of happiness in your life by just doing things intentionally that create happiness for you. Once again, Marty Seligman, authentic happiness comes from identifying and cultivating your fundamental strengths and using them every day in work, love, play, and I love this, and in parenting, which I think is actually really great to think about being a strengths-based parent as well in terms of the work that we do. So strengths matter. One of the things about people who use their strengths is that they believe they're capable of achieving their goals. Don't we all love this? They have lower levels of stress, right? And so when I talk about stress, often I actually don't talk about the psychology of stress. I talk about the physiology of stress. I think you guys all know this, but it's a nice reminder that high levels of stress have an impact on the levels of cortisol. And chronic stress actually means we're producing cortisol on a regular basis. Intermittent cortisol during the fight or flight is actually fine, but if we have chronic stress, it actually has an influence on all of our major systems in our body. And so what we do when we do stress reduction is we re-regulate dysregulated systems. And so this idea of just focusing on your strengths and using them in your life means that you can actually have less levels of stress and be physically healthier. And people who use their strengths in new and different ways every day report higher levels of stress. So strengths are like muscles. The more you use them, the stronger they become. So I want you guys to think about when you started driving a car, right? Most of us started driving a car someplace between about 15 and 20, right? And how good of a driver were you when you started driving? On a scale from 1 to 10, 1 being poor and 10 being great, how good of a driver for you? So the ladies in the room are shaking their head like, that might have been a 2. I might have thought I was a 4, but over time, I really realized I was a 1. It's that sort of thing, right? That's how that works. The next question is, how good of a driver are you now? Right? I'm still a 4, right? I'm dying for the self-driving car. But most people have great improvement in their life over time, and they normally would say, I'm about a 7 or 8 when I drive, right? That feel like that's about right? And some people even say they're a 10. I have a colleague, and she is definitely a 10. She loves driving, and she's an amazing driver. So that was really all about practicing that all the time. That's the way that it happens. And so if you take nothing else home in this whole webinar today about happiness, it's about doing things and being intentional about them and practicing them over and over and over again. If we don't practice them, we will not get any better. It plays out in my private practice all the time where folks come in wanting skills, and so I give them skills, and we talk about having a tool belt for your skills, and I go home, and they come home, and 2 weeks later they come back, and I said, how'd that work? And they go, I didn't do it. And I said, well, how do you plan on your life to be getting better if you're not doing it, right? So this is the idea of really practicing those things and making sure we're working on those particular strengths. If you guys have never taken this is an amazing assessment. You can see right at the top, it's viacharacter.org. I'll give you a second if you want to write that down and talk you through these. But the VIA Character Institute is actually out of the University of Pennsylvania. It's out of Marty Seligman's University of Pennsylvania School of Positive Psychology. And what they did is they actually looked at 24 strengths, and you can see them in a smaller print, and then they have 6 virtues, which are to the left. And the virtues are universal, and the strengths are fairly universal. And what they saw is that the strengths fell in these 6 areas of wisdom and knowledge, courage, humanity, justice, temperance, and transcendence. So one of the nice things you could do is you can go online, you can complete this assessment. It takes about 20 minutes to do. You have to register. They want some basic demographic information. And then you can take the test, and it will give you your strengths from 1 to 24. Now, you're going to be like everybody else is, and you're going to want to look at your 20 to 24, right? That's a natural way that it happens. My 24, and we laugh all the time with my friends, is humility. I actually don't think I had any in temperance higher than about 20. So those are my lowest areas. But my highest areas actually fell out in 2 broad categories. My number 1 is gratitude, number 2 is humor, and my 5th is hope. And those fit into the virtue of transcendence. And so it's about the strength that forge connections with the larger universe and provide meaning. So I'm a person that says everything happens for a reason, and that's how I've lived my life. And so that's part of how I focus things. I superimpose that with this virtue of humanity. So my number 3 was love, and it means love as in, and I'll go back so you can see it. It means loving both love and being loved, valuing close relationships with others. And so it's not romantic love, it's my loving friends. I have a high level of social intelligence and kindness. And kindness isn't the same as caring. Kindness is generosity, nurturance, caring, compassion, altruism, and this kind of sense of niceness. And so that's what that is. And so when you put those together, that actually speaks to who I am. I'm a person who believes that things happen for a reason, but I also believe in social connections. So one of the things that I do all the time is when I see somebody new to town, I try to introduce them to folks. I have Sunday dinners where I have the same group of 8 people come over for Sunday dinner about once a month. We'll actually have one this Sunday. And, that's one of the things that I do to really be able to nurture this idea of humanity. So there are particular things that I do that I focus on. And when I recognize this, what I can do is we can actually talk. When we talk about Sunday dinners, we actually talk about our connection, our love. They talk about the fact that I'm a good host. And what I say, it's really about bringing people together to be able to have kind, loving conversations and supporting each other. And we support each other through divorces, through parents dying, through weddings, through all kinds of things. And so that's been a really lovely way to look at that. So that's how those can be used. And that's what I said before, this idea of really making sure we focus on those and know what those are. And at this point, actually, we've all taken the Sunday dinner folks, all have taken those, and we've learned things about each other so we can actually use those strengths in different ways. So then Sonia Lyubomirsky again talked about this idea in her book, The How of Happiness. She talked about this idea of how we can cultivate happiness. And so you can see my little slogan at the top, life sometimes hurts, but happiness is the cure. And so in the kind of reddish color, you can see there are some highlighted, and we're going to go through those very specifically and ways you can cultivate those. But some other things that she talked about are optimism. And we talked about that earlier about optimists are people who look at, who recognize that bad things happen, but look towards the positives of things. Another thing she talked about a lot is to avoid overthinking. So I'm not sure, maybe you're perseverators. I had been one in my life. The ladies here are smiling, so I think there might be 1, 2, or 3 in the room. I'm not sure. And I'll let all that go. You guys self-assess. I don't expect you to do that for me. But that idea of really overthinking, learning to forgive, practicing kindness, this idea of committing goals is number 9. And then we'll talk some more about the other ones very specifically and how to do that. But these are the things that she talks about in her book, that if we do some of these things, it's really important. We're talking about some of these specifically because when we get to the conclusion, we'll actually talk more about what the fit is for folks. Robert Emmons is a researcher out of UC Davis. You can live a happier, healthier life by just being grateful. We're very fortunate to have him very close. He came to one of a meetings that I coordinated to talk about gratitude and what that means for folks. His definition through his research talked about affirming goodness and recognizing that the source of goodness comes from outside of ourselves. So I don't talk about gratitude about, oh my God, I'm so grateful that I made such a good outfit today. That looks so adorable today. That's not something we're grateful for. What I am grateful for is the smiling faces across the table from me today, right? That is something I'm grateful for. Those things outside of ourselves. So what are the benefits of gratitude? He talked about them in 4 broad categories. And once again, I love that he talked about the psychological and the physical aspects of things. So psychologically, there are people that have greater levels of positive emotion. Once again, we're back to this idea of reducing stress, which can also fit into physical. But he also talked about people that have physical, that practice gratitude, have better health, better energy, fewer symptoms, and sleep better. And who wouldn't love that? Then we talked about having there's chuckles here. All right, so you guys know what you have to do now. So the next one is about interpersonal, and it's about helping connect with others. And so people who have practiced gratitude are actually less lonely and less isolated. And then having a powerful spiritual connection. You're more loving, more giving, forgiving, and humble. And then lastly, he talks about communicating your gratitude to others. And there's lots of ways you can do that. He talks about some big ways. He talks about things like gratitude letters, and I've written one to friends. I've written one to my 3 closest friends where I say something I'm grateful for, and I write the letter. I sit with them face to face. I read the letter, and then I give them the letter. And the first one I did this to, he was so overwhelmed he actually couldn't embrace what I was saying to him, and he sort of laughed, and my feelings got so hurt. I was like, this doesn't feel good. And a few months later, we talked, and he goes, I couldn't embrace all the things you were saying. It was too hard in that moment. But, needless to say, he's kept that card over all these years, over the last, 8 years or so that we've been doing this, so that I've been doing this. And so it actually does work. But there's also ways you can practice gratitude in very small ways. So every day I wear a ring on my right finger, and I say something I'm grateful for when I put it on. So when I put my ring on, and so I just took it off, and I'm putting it back on, and so I'm going to say, I'm grateful that it's a beautiful sunny day in Sacramento, and the weather is clear. And really, it's going to be a lovely fall day before you know it. So that's something that you can be grateful for. And there's actually big things or little things you can be grateful for. They talk a lot about being grateful for large things, but I actually think it's important to be grateful for lots of things all day. So you can do those things where you can have your own personal touchstones about gratitude. You can have a ring that you put on every day. You can do it when you get in your car. You can put something on your mirror in the bedroom. So you can do anything. So let's go ahead and practice right now. So grab your pen and pencil. And I want you to say, just write down one thing you're grateful for. I am grateful for, all right? And so you guys have just all started a gratitude journal. So this could be day 1 of your gratitude journal. One of the things that Robert Emmons talks about is he talks about a 21-day gratitude journal where you write things daily about being grateful. I have a client who is a man who had 3 adolescent sons, and he felt very disconnected from his sons. He described that his wife was the primary parent. She picked him up and took him to school. She did all the cooking, and he didn't understand how he could connect them. And he said, I ask them how their day is every day, and they go, it's fine, Dad. My day is fine, which is a very common response. So we actually changed things around. And one of the things that he did is we talked about, so when you talk to them at night before you put them to bed or kiss them goodnight, just say something you're grateful for. And he has two twins who sleep in the same bed and another son. So he goes in their rooms and he talks about what he's grateful for related to them every day. And what he said, his experience with that was it opened up the relationship with his sons and it changed that relationship. And so now he picks them up from school occasionally. They'll actually tell him more about his day based on that. They've actually switched it around as well, and they tell him what they're grateful for about him. So that's the way that could work in your lives in terms of how that could really actualize for you. The next one is about flow. And so flow is a psychological state that accompanies highly engaged activities. You actually lose track of time. A person sort of becomes one with the activity. The aftermath is invigorating. Everyone experiences flow regardless of your skill. And you can experience it in a solitary way or social activities. And so for me, I always talk about I'm in my flow in the kitchen. I spent 3 hours cooking on Sunday, roasting vegetables, making a pot of beans, grilling some meat, and I was as happy as could be. So my husband was actually taking care of his mother that day, and I said, I'm in my happy place. He said, yeah, you're in the kitchen, aren't you? And I said, yes. And it's interesting to see how much I was in my flow. So when you're in your flow, one thing you can do with that is savor that. So now that I'm thinking about this, I'm savoring it in many ways. I'm thinking about how great that was, just being in the kitchen. I had my music up really loud. I'm slicing and dicing. Nobody was around, just me and the cat doing our thing. And then I can also think tonight, my meal is going to be really delicious. I've already planned what I'm going to have because there's going to be these delicious leftovers. So it can happen both for me in present time and going back in time and then thinking in the future about what that's like. But let me show you an example of what this could look like for you. And we hope this technology works. The speakers aren't very loud, so my apologies. Oops, my apologies. All right. So thank you for indulging me. Clearly, that is a man who is in his flow, right? He lost track of time. I don't even think he was paying attention to who was dancing on the dance floor, right? He could have cared less. He was just having a good time in that moment. And so they're classifying him as the happiest DJ ever. And I really look at that as a man who's in his flow. He is doing what he loves. This is not a young man who's dancing, because actually this was a bar mitzvah that he's at. So, yes, you can well imagine, right? But this is a man probably my age in his 40s or 50s, really enjoying the hell out of life. And so I love that because it talks about what flow can look like. The next thing are some various coping strategies we can use. And so one is about building resilience. And this picture of Tina Turner is one of my favorite pictures. This is from her, it was a pantyhose campaign by Hanes, and the hose were called Resilience. And so this is her, and I love these three shots of her because we know the life she's lived. You know, her life has been in a movie, and she's been very resilient. And resilience is basically the ability to adapt well after facing adversity. So people with higher levels of resilience adapt more quickly than people with lower levels of resilience. Resilience and happiness are both generated from the same portion of our prefrontal cortex, so they're connected together in terms of how we think about things. So people who are happier generally are more resilient as well. Happy people view their problems as predictable and controllable. So when a problem happens, I know what's going to happen, and I'm able to control what goes on. I don't feel like everything is out of control, right? And so if we think about the last series of natural disasters that have happened around the world, we've had a few hurricanes, we've had the earthquake in Mexico. They could actually look at the more resilient people and the less resilient people based on how they're able to manage what's coming next. Because you'll hear people say things naturally like, we'll rebuild, things will get better, things will improve. Those are people who have a higher level of resilience. The last one is developing resilience requires anticipating challenges and using your resources, right? So we've all had past successes. So it's about identifying those past successes and then using those, and then also having a support network around you that can tell you that, yeah, this is the right thing, you'll be fine, and help support you. So that's ways you can build resilience as one particular coping strategy. The second one is calming the mind. And I love that picture as well because it's this man sitting there in his kind of Zen-like Buddhist pose, and the world is passing by him quickly. And calming the mind has been very common. So in my continuing education classes, mindfulness, stress reduction, those things have all been much more popular in the last 5 to 7 years. And so we've recognized how important that is, that it's extremely beneficial to our health. And it's about practicing an overactive mind. We actually, I think part of it is because the fact that we have a computer in our hands or pockets or purses all the time, that overwhelming technology can actually create an overactive life. People on social media, it's actually even worse because you're checking those things. But it can really help with that. People with calm minds sleep well, experience life moment to moment, are less stressed, and are anxious. And so I'll give you an example of what happened to me recently. I was camping. Really, I was glamping. I can't really say I was camping because I did no cooking. There was a lodge that did the cooking. You just drop the dishes off. There's a waterfront. But I went out for a hike up a creek, and I'm laying up a creek without a paddle. I actually did not have a paddle, but I was really up the creek. So I'm laying on this rock in the shade, and it was a really hot day. So the shade was really lovely, and I could hear the rush of the creek, and the creek was very powerful, heading one way. So it was heading to the left of me. And then I laid there quietly, and I could feel this very cool breeze. It was a very slow breeze come across my body. And it was this very interesting moment for me where I was very connected to the power of the earth in terms of the water and how powerful that was, and the softness and gentleness of the breeze blowing across my body. And it was great because I remember laying, I was with my niece who's 17 and she's a chatty Cathy and she wanted to chat. And I said, sweetie, I just need 10 minutes. Uncle Reggie just needs 10 minutes. That's all I need. And she kept talking to me. I said, I promise, 10 minutes is all I need. We'll set the timer on our phone and we'll get 10 minutes. So I laid there for that 10 minutes. And it was such a beautiful moment to have that time of just being there in that moment and listening to what was around me and not doing anything else. So once again, a very small amount of time, and it was a very nice place, but a very small amount of time, 10 minutes, actually helped me sleep better that night. I remember thinking I didn't sleep as well as I could because it's not hard, can't match this. And that night I slept better. And so for me, it was really a connection between taking that few minutes to be in that particular place. I love this quote, ancient Zen proverb. You should sit in silent meditation for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should sit for an hour. And so I think that that's a great example. That's a great example of what we could do, because when I think about it, and I talk all the time about this in all aspects of my life, we can actually take probably a minimum of 3 times 5 minutes a day and do some mindfulness activities, right? We can, for women, I would say you can go to the bathroom and go in the stall, right? Because that's a very private place if you need to. It's not the best place, but it is a private place. But to be able to take those few minutes and do whatever activity works best for you, whether it be deep breathing into your nose, out to your mouth, whether it be counting your breaths. So another relaxation exercise is taking deep breaths in and counting them. And when you get to the breath, let's say you count in 5, you want to exhale out more. So if I breathe in 5, I want to exhale out 7 or 8. And when you do that and you count, you actually can't do multiple things. The idea of multitasking actually doesn't make sense because we actually can never do 2 things at once. So if you're doing that, your brain can't do anything else. As another example of things we could do that just calm us down. And those are very simple things that, once again, help us sleep better, stay in the moment, and decrease our stress and anxiety. People with calm minds are stressed and anxious. I should say less stressed and anxious. Oops, typo. So the second, the last of the strategies is savoring, and I love savoring. I think it was one of the things I added about 2 years ago into my life. As I heard about this in this training, I thought this is just such a beautiful thing, and you can see this little boy doing this. And how often do you really savor and look at awe? I've been riding my bike to work lately, and so the mornings are so beautiful. They're very calm. They're very cool. The sun is coming up, and that color in the trees in the morning when the light shines through it, it's just various colors of green. That's an idea of really being able to savor, and that's savoring in the moment. So taking time to, quote, stop and smell the roses, and researchers have said that savoring enhances happiness and boosts feelings of appreciation and gratitude. So you can see the link between all of those things. Savoring can occur at various time frames, as I mentioned. It can be anticipating it. So I'm talking about how I'm excited about having this great meal tonight. It could be about experiencing in the past. I went to Southeast Asia this March, and I went to the Angkor Wat temples and went to a city called Luang Prabang, and I can go back in those places, right? We have our phones. We have pictures on our phones. So if I want to go back and savor, I can look at some of those pictures. And then, that's experience the present. So I can think about what's happening now. Reminiscing at the past. You guys got that with the pictures. So also being in the present, which is just sitting here now, really just enjoying the fact that I get to do such important work to be of service to people. And so that's really savoring the moment right now. And as I sit here thinking about that, I get a little emotional because it's so important that I just take time to think, wow, I'm so lucky to do the work I do every day. So savoring helps us deepen the impact that positive events that they have in our emotional lives. And so those are the three strategies. The next one is about this idea of social connections. Good friends don't let you do stupid things alone. I had a card that I just sent to the same friend I did the gratitude card with, and it said, you're my best friend. The inside said, sorry, and I just sent that off this week. So it's about knowing and having those social connections, right? We're inherently social people. That's actually most people. There are a few people that aren't, but that's very uncommon that people aren't inherently social. Good social support buffers stress. And strong social connections can change the image of ourselves. They can remove us from our self-focus. They provide constructive feedback and strengthen communities. So I'll talk about changing self-image. I lost about 50 pounds about 8 years ago, and I was with a friend. I have a friend I walk with about 3 Sundays a month. And she said, Reggie, you do know your average weight now. And I said, well, no, I'm a bit, how we all are. I'm a bit pudgy here and there. I've got my shanks, my back shanks, my ham hocks, all those things. And she said, you're crazy. You're a very average-sized person. And she was very clear about that reflection of the self-image, and I embraced that because I trusted what she had to say as a friend. So I didn't need to believe it myself. I believed that she believed it, and then I could start to embrace that. That's actually how that can happen. People providing constructive feedback is a very easy one. Less focus on ourselves, so when we get into our heads, right, that pulls us out of our heads, because actually people who are more isolated are lonelier and make less better decisions. And then obviously having good social connections strengthens the broader community. So when you do that, it creates and improves our communities overall. So now let's talk about spiritual and lifestyle choices. Lubomirski talked mostly about lifestyle choices, but I'd like to also bring in this idea of spirituality into this as well, because it feels like such an important piece in our lives. So you can see the circle on the right. When I describe health, I talk about health in 3 ways. I talk about how is my physical health, how is my spiritual health, and how is my mental emotional health. And I don't ever separate those things out. I keep those connected when I think about the things that I do. Because what I think about on a daily basis, what are the things that I do that regularly contribute to maximizing my health in those ways? I'm 56 years old, so my physical health is always going to be on the decline until I die. I'm past that place. But how do I maximize the physical health that I have, and what does that look like? And so, for me, when I think about what my physical health looks like, I think about running specifically. I've been a jogger for 40 years this year, and so it obviously contributes to my physical health. But when I finish a run, I'm emotionally just better. Those endorphins have kicked in. And when I'm running, I always tell people I look for my church. I look for a place where I'm in my spiritual place. I'm not what's it called, path runner. I only run on roads, not on trails. I'm not a trail runner. I only run on roads because I just like the feeling of the road, and I like to just be able to sort of lose myself in that moment. So I always look for something that feels like my church, and so I make the spiritual connections. That's actually how I can have a threefer with that. But we should always be looking for ways that we do that, because oftentimes we separate these things out, and people can focus, for example, in the Black community, you can have women focusing on their spiritual health and be morbidly obese. And so I think about how do you balance those things out. And so it's not about being less spiritual. It's also just adding the physical health into those things. So in terms of our physical health, it's about regular exercise, right? It helps our body flow. And aerobic exercise is great for reducing anxiety. That's just the physiological aspects of what happens there. And really finding for physical what really makes the most sense for you in terms of physical exercise. Some people like gyms, some people like running, some people like walking. It's whatever makes the most sense to you, cycling, whatever feels right for you is what you have to focus on. The next is sleep. Sleep really plays a critical role, and I think you guys all know this, but there are studies about sleep that people that don't get enough sleep when they're driving look like they're driving drunk. So that's what sleep deprived can bring. And when I talk to my clients about sleep, and I talk to them all the time about it, I always say, how many hours of sleep do you need a night? I need 9 hours a night. So if I have to back up my night for 9 hours a night, I get to work at 7:30, it takes me a half an hour, which means I need 45 minutes in the morning. I have to get up at 6:15. Okay, so that means I have to be in bed by 9 and be sleeping by 9:15 to get 9 hours. It's that simple. Because what am I doing between 9:15 and 10:30, right? I'm on my phone, I'm watching TV, I'm not doing anything really important. But if I do something that's actually really important, which means getting sleep, I can actually be fully productive in my daytime. And so that's why I talk to people about how much you need. There are very few people, Bill Clinton is one of them, that needs 5 hours of sleep a night. That's very uncommon. Most people on average need 8 hours of sleep. Few people need 7, most people need 8, some people need 9. So that's just another important part of things that I'd like to reinforce, because that's actually a part of making some simple lifestyle choices. That's a very simple choice for me to get in bed every night at 9 o'clock. It's uncomplicated, right? To do that. I have no kids, so maybe with no children. Yeah, I have them, but they're like, I wish I like you. I have no kids. I cook, but my strategy is right. Like I cook on Sundays for the whole week, so I never have to cook when I get home. Right? It's just warming stuff up or making a salad, so I don't cook during the week. So that's part of what I did to be able to get to sleep. So you can do that. I give you that choice as well to be able to do that for yourself. So then the last is nutrition, and it's about consuming functional foods, and I love that term, functional foods. So I laugh and say, I'm a vegetarian about 90% of the time, maybe 95% of the time. The other 5 or 10%, yeah, I eat meat, but 95% of the time I eat mostly fruits and vegetables, and I've really just decided I want to eat less processed food. And that's the decision I made. And people go, well, that's so hard, you're so motivated. And I said, well, it's a simple choice. I can have a candy bar or I can have apple. That's a choice that I make. And to me, I just look at it in a very simple way about choices versus this idea of, oh, you're really motivated to do that, or you're really, you have all these skills. No, to me, it's just a very simple choice about what I do, and it's about thinking more functionally about our food. And you guys know this all the time, it's the work you do. So it's a very easy way for us to do that. And I also think I don't feel okay talking to you guys about health and wellness if I'm not doing that same thing. So in WIC, if you're not consuming nutritious foods, is it okay for you to talk to them about nutrition? Not okay, but does it make sense? So I just throw that out there for folks. Mm-hmm. So the last piece of this is about finding your fit. We'll have a few minutes for questions. So Lou Bomersky's work was all about this idea of what your fit is. And what she talks about with fit is, what are the things you do that contribute to your happiness? So you guys can probably hear from me that the things that I do that contribute to my happiness, that I practice gratitude. I do a lot of savoring. I don't get to get into my flow as often, but when I'm in my flow, I'm there. And then I do things that are very specifically about my physical, mental, and spiritual health. And so I do those kinds of things that make me happier. So when you find your fit, you're more likely to be happy. You're more likely to adhere to those things, right? I'm doing things that I enjoy doing, so I'm not trying to find things that doesn't work. You're more likely to be successful, and that means successful in life, in relationships, at work, every place. And it's the biggest boost to your happiness. So we take a look at this diagram. You can see the horizontal is what is the importance to you, and the vertical is what is the effectiveness. And so there's these 4 quadrants. So when I think about what I want to do, and as you guys start to think about how you can embrace this for yourself, this first quadrant about low effectiveness and low importance, don't do those things. As you start to develop what it looks like, you can see that if you're in the high effectiveness and low importance, or vice versa, you're pretty okay. But when you get to the high importance and high effectiveness, that's when you're really firing on all 8 cylinders, 6 cylinders. It's a car metaphor. I don't know why I'm doing that. That's like being a sports metaphor. Anyway, you're doing really well. So as I mentioned, if I do those things that work and that fit for me, I'm actually better. I broke my foot about 4 weeks ago, and so I haven't been able to run. So I had to figure out what else. I've been commuting to work on my bike to be able to have that sort of endorphin pumped because I know that that's just better for me to do for myself in terms of what my fit is. So what will it be for you? If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. The question for you is, how will you be a change agent? You got to remember that you do important work, but to also take a break, to go for a walk. I've been very committed to this week because I run on my lunch break, but I've been able to do that when I'm not able to run, I get out of the office for about 5 or 10 minutes, just go for a couple-minute walk around the block just to make sure I'm getting up. To regularly practice deep breathing. At work, to ask yourself, is this really my business? Am I getting into people's, am I staying in my lane, or am I swerving, right? Am I staying in my lane, right? Is this my business, right? to not, yes, we all understand what that is. To take responsibility for your actions, but to also not take things personally. To practice a lot of self-talk for yourself, right? Self-talk is, you know, the simple things about I'm a good person, but it's also about things that you do well. So for some people, they go, it sounds conceited, but I can say, because people have said that I cook well. And so I say, yeah, I'm a good cook, right? I make people laugh well. That's what I do. People have said that, so I know that. Keep positive affirmations around you, right? So whatever that looks like. One of my favorite ones that's at my house now that I've had for about 25 years is a life lived in fear is a life half lived. So that I think about that when I do things. And then the other thing is you can actually have a slogan to say, you know, it'll be a great day. And so it's doing some of those things. But how will you work in for yourself to be that change agent? And so one of the things that I started about a year ago is that we've named our days of the week. So Monday is Make It Work Monday. Tuesday is Terrific Tuesday. And so when somebody goes and they go, Happy Tuesday, and I said, it's Terrific Tuesday, and I'll be terrific all day. Wednesday is Woohoo Wednesday. Thankful Thursday. So I say things I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for these beautiful smiles in front of me. Thankful Thursday, and a Fabulous Friday. And so I use that to reference the days in a positive way because that's actually putting positivity into my environment. So I've become the change agent. So people will say, what is today, Reggie? And I'm like, oh, Thankful Thursday. I'm really glad you asked me. So grateful for that. So people can start to see that, right? So you can be the change agent in your environment. You don't have to wait for somebody else to do it. I think we get into this space we think somebody should change the environment for us. And I think I've got to make those changes. You know, just like Alice Walker said, any happiness I get, I have to make myself. So I'm going to make my own happiness irrespective of the environment that we're in because it can't always be that way, but we can really work toward that. Here's some of my favorite resources. So here's some websites. Happify is a really good one, the Good Science Center, the Character Strength, the Positive Psychology Center, and then Insight Timer on the far right is actually an app that has meditations. There's several of these. This one is free. It tells you within the app, but it has 5-minute meditations, half-an-hour meditations. It has the chimes. It has all kinds of things. So with that, Gandhi said, I can't read the right side. Happiness, can you guys read that?
Happiness is when you...
Happiness is when you...
What you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony.
Happiness is when what you think, what you say, and what you do are in harmony. Mahatma Gandhi. So let me play this last video. So one of the things that I love as well is I love to laugh because laughter is not only good medicine, it's a great stress reducer. So I'll give you guys this for a couple minutes and we'll see if there's any questions.
Did it scare you?
All right. Okay. And with that, I don't know, Margaret, what you want to do about questions. You guys can watch that on your own if you want. What you'd like to do about questions, Margaret? Let me get rid of that.
Hard to compete with those little ones. Yeah, I don't see any questions in yet, but while people are thinking about any questions or comments they have, I hope you will write them in the question box. Well, I wanted to say that one thing I'm grateful for, there are many things, but one of them is Reggie's generosity and your energy and your positivity today. Thank you so much for presenting for us and allowing us to have your slides and a recording on our website. Here's where you can find it, under calwic.org under the Events tab, and information about future and past webinars as well if you missed any of them. I really appreciate what Reggie had to say about a lot of things. Of course, gratitude. We've had Dr. Emmons speak at our conference in the past. We also had a webinar several years ago about mindfulness. I know several people out in local WIC agencies have been doing gratitude journals together. In fact, some of those will be featured in our upcoming WIC Watch magazine. So lots of these things have been tossed around before, but you did a great job of summarizing and just giving us a positive way to finish our week and go forward. And hopefully everybody will have just a terrific fall season. Let me see, there are a few questions. Basically, first a comment. Thanks so much for today. Somebody asked if they'll be receiving the PowerPoint presentation. I just mentioned it'll be posted on our website. There will also be a link to the recording in your follow-up email, which will come from GoToWebinar tomorrow. So it looks like we don't have any other questions, and it's 1 p.m. Time to get back to what we were doing, but hopefully with an even more positive, happy attitude. Anything you want to add, Reggie?
No, just thanks you guys very much, and I really do want you to really think about how you can be a change agent using happiness in your office to create just a better workplace and a better self. Happy, thankful Thursday, and have a great day.
Thanks. Same to you. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.